Okay, welcome to our discussion on emotion. And let us jump right into things and talk about. I want to talk about a few early theories on emotion in terms of the where emotion comes from. And these early theories dealt with the question of the relationship between the subjective experience of emotion, so the actual feeling, in relation to any kind of physiological changes in your body. And so it's kind of a chicken and the egg question, which came first. So, according to the James Lange theory, uh, you have this sort of flow chart, this sort of sequence. You have an event, something happens out in the world, and that causes changes in your physiology. Your body reacts to that change, that perceived event. So, for example, your heart might race. If you see something happening that, let's say, it's causing fear, right? A fear. So maybe something like a snake appears suddenly, causes your heart to race. All of a sudden, adrenaline flowing through your body, and you get really tense. It's the basic fight or flight response. And as a result of those physiological changes, you would then feel the subjective experience of fear in that last sequence, the emotional experience of fear, right? So, for example, James Lang might say something like, because I am smiling, I know that I'm happy, right? So you have something that caused you to smile, and then you realize that you're smiling, and then um, that leads you to feel happy. And that's actually, as a sort of a side note, there's something in the literature called the facial feedback hypothesis, or facial feedback effect. Basically, it says that based on the sort of the contortions of our face, that can guide our emotional experience. So, we know what our face is contorted like when we're feeling sad. We know from classical conditioning and other things that what our face muscles are contorted when we're feeling happy, when we're smiling, and as a result, then we'll feel the subjective experience of happiness. And here's a real simple experiment that's been done, uh, and it's not really necessary to write this down or know this, but researchers had people look at little comic cartoons, like Far Side and so on, and they had them rate them on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of how funny they thought they were. Half of the people who were doing the ratings were asked to hold a pen with their lips around the pen the whole time. Seems kind of weird, but that's what they were asked to do, right? So you can imagine they just put this pen in their mouth and they held it with their lips. Okay. The other half of the subjects in this experiment were asked to hold the pen with their teeth, the top and bottom front teeth, right? To sort of bite down on it. And then do that while they're rating how funny these little comics are. And the results indicated that the people in the second group, the one who were asked to hold it with their teeth, thought the comics were significantly funnier. And the reason why that is because when they're holding the pen with their teeth, that contorts their face in such a way, in a very similar way to how your muscles are contorted when you smile. There's a lot of the same muscles are contracted. And so people, again, based on classical conditioning, they sort of, there's a lot of similarity between how their body is reacting. And they said, well, this must mean that I'm happy, must mean that I really think this is funny. And therefore, they said this therefore must be a funny comic. Whereas the people who were holding the pen with just their lips, they did not, they perceived that they were not contorting their face in a smiling fashion. And then they probably thought, well, none of these really turns out are very funny or as funny as the second group. Okay. Now, another approach is the Cannon-Bard approach. And what this says is that you perceive an event, and then what happens is it, at the same time, causes a physiological reaction and the subjective experience of the emotion. Both of them at the same time. Okay? So you get the event that happens, whatever it is out in the world, causes a change in your body physiologically, and at the same time, an emotional experience. Now, at that time, we're talking about, I think the time period here we're talking about is maybe the late 1800s, early 1900s, for these theories. There was evidence for both. So you can have, there's some evidence that says that the James Lang is supported, and some say that the Cannon-Bard is supported. And there's a third theory that we'll get to in a little bit that I want to talk about. It's more of a cognitive approach. So we'll wait for a few minutes on that one. Let's talk a little bit about some research by Ekman. Now, Ekman will be talking about a fair amount because he is one of the prominent researchers on emotion and psychology. And in this particular section, I wanted to just mention that he did some research on this idea of, is there such a thing as an emotional fingerprint? What that means is, for each emotion that you experience, is there a certain physiological change happening? So a certain portrait, sort of physiologically, that happens with one emotion that doesn't happen with the other, any other emotion. And you can see on this slide the short answer to that is yes, it does seem to be that each individual emotion has its own sort of profile, if you will, in terms of the physiological status. So let's look at, for example, on the bottom, look at anger, and look at the two, so on the far left there. And we got the two charts here. There's two graphs: heart change, right, and finger temperature change. So when you're feeling anger, you have that kind of profile. The bar is very high on both of them. Now compare that particular emotion to any of the others. None of the other emotions, fear, sadness, happiness, has the same or even close to the same portrait in terms of the physiological changes. So in theory, if we had enough data like this, for example, enough normative data to construct what is sort of the base rate or the normal portrait physiologically for a given emotion, you could do it sort of reverse engineer and measure someone's heart change and finger temperature change and other physiological markers, and then look at the data and then say, based on all this other previous research, we would say that with some degree of confidence that that person was feeling X emotion, whatever it was. So very fascinating and interesting to know that each of them are unique. Now, this research, I just want to briefly mention, by Tomarkin back in '92, found that positive emotions and negative emotions are centered in different spheres of the brain, right? So on the very bottom, you can see that compared to subjects who showed greater EEG activity in the right hemisphere, those with the more active left hemisphere had emotions that were more positive, right? So left hemisphere, right? So that's the the light green line, more positive, and so you can see that on the two charts, the two bars on the left. And the right hemisphere active subjects, more negative emotions. Interesting. Okay. Now we got another classic study by Ekman in '87 on the expression of emotions. Now here we're talking about nonverbal communication of emotion. And what Edmund did was he showed these faces to people in many, I think a few dozen countries. So, cross culturally, many different countries. And basically, it just said the simple question was for everybody in these countries, what emotion is this face feeling? And what he found was tremendous agreement in the emotion that people were able to easily say, oh yeah, that's happiness, that's sadness, whatever. So there's a high degree of agreement across cultures. Now, what that means for most evolutionary psychologists is that to the degree that you get high correlations in the answers and people cross culturally, that means that the thing that you're looking at probably was not necessarily a learned, but rather hardwired into us. It's part of our of being human, right? The degree, if you're getting agreements of or correlations of 80, 90% cross culturally, there's very little variability, right? Cross culturally, that means that that it's not learned; it's something genetic. So, meaning that our ability, what this is suggesting, according to Ekman, is that our ability to understand or perceive emotion expression is hardwired into us. We don't have to learn what is disgust or what is fear and so on in an emotion expression. If you're wondering what all these are, you're probably able to ascertain these all. These are also what he calls the 6 basic emotions. So starting on the left, you have happiness. Then going from left to right, anger. Then we have in the third from the left, sadness. And then you let's start with the right, fear, right? And then second from the right is disgust. And third from the right is surprise. Okay, so and there's other if you do a Google image search for 6 basic emotions or Ekman and emotion expression, you'll find different versions of these 6 faces. These were, I believe, some of the early ones that he used in his original studies. Okay. Now, another interesting question is, what about the expression of emotion in babies? Do babies have to learn how to show emotion? And what Izzard's study shows is that they do not seem to need to learn how to express emotion. And that's evolutionarily, that makes sense, right? You shouldn't, for a baby to be able to survive and thrive, it has to communicate its needs clearly and accurately as possible to its caregiver. It has to be able to make eye contact and and look at the face of its caregiver and say, "Hey, I'm feeling this," or "I need this," right? And it shouldn't need to learn how to show these. And what Izzard did was got a bunch of babies together and um, took photos of them showing these various different emotion expressions from really young babies. And then we asked people what emotions this baby's feeling. People were able to also very clearly say, "Oh yeah, that's the baby's feeling happy or sad." Now, these, admittedly, this slide is like a copy of a copy of a copy, so it's not the clearest. But I'll try to let's see if we can walk through these emotions. Now, uh, on the far left is the baby's feeling disgust. He's kind of sticking his tongue out a little bit and he's kind of shaking his head a little bit. Second from the left is surprise. Third from the left is sad, right? You got the little curled lip. And now starting over to the far right, happy. And then second from the right is fear or scared. And then the third from the right is anger. Okay, so very different emotions in these young babies. Okay. Now, staying on this evolutionary theme with Ekman and some of his other research, and there was in Darwin's one of his books, I forget which one, if it was the I don't. I'm not sure which of the. I think he wrote several books, but in one of them, let's just say he um, had made the assertion that um, our ability to detect threat should be much sharper than our ability to detect um, friendship, positive emotions in other people. And that's out of necessity because you want to be able to, if you're going to survive, right, survival of the fittest, you want to be able to detect any kind of threat from potential competitor or a predator, whatever. So you need to and be able to. That's crucially important to your survival, rather, and someone who is friendly to you or feeling positively toward you. That's not a threat to your survival. So those abilities to perceive that kind of emotion shouldn't be as necessarily sharp. So what Hansen and Hansen did to test this, a really simple study, where they had several hundred people, all together, big group outside, and they had sort of a big crane, like, and doing an overhead photograph of them. They're all looking up, right? And they said so everybody should show a really happy face, and then one person in the group was going to show an angry face. Okay, and they took that photo. And then they took another photo of basically the opposite, where everybody was showing an angry face and an angry expression, and one person was showing a very happy, smiling expression. Took that photo. Okay. Then you bring people into the lab and you say, okay, I'm going to show you a photo, and I want you to find the one face that's different, the one emotional expression that's different, and do it as quickly as possible. And so they timed them, right? So they, showed the photo and they hit the stopwatch. And lo and behold, according to Darwin's prediction, the results indicated quite clearly that people were significantly faster at finding the one angry face in the sea of happy faces. They said, oh, boom, there it is. They were way faster at doing that and better at doing that than finding the one happy face in the sea of angry faces. So that's some data also to support this contention of Darwin about our relative ability to detect threat versus emotion expressions versus positive emotion expressions. Now let's jump over to talking about our sort of educated guesses about what people are feeling based on nonverbal info that we get from them, what they're feeling. Let's first start with eye contact. Uh, in with eye contact, let's say that someone's avoiding eye contact. The first thing you probably tend to think is that they're maybe they're shy, or maybe they're being evasive, or they're lying about something. Right? They can't look you in the eye. Right? That's a lot of times why we say, "Hey, look me in the eye," and say that. So eye contact is a big thing. We infer that those things about the person, right, about the emotion that they're feeling, maybe shyness or evasiveness or deceit, based on that. Now, what about people with good eye contact, good regular eye contact? We would assume that we probably think that they're interested in what we're talking about. They have good social skills, and we make those inferences. Now, when it comes to staring, in the absence of, let's say, in a romantic context, staring you might see as an invitation, right, or a sign of interest. But in the absence of a romantic context, staring is often seen, and this is universal for animals and people. Staring is seen as a sign of hostility. Right? You see someone staring at you, and there's no, there's no romantic context. What's the first thing you think? You think, "What's your problem?" Right? You want to you want to step outside? want a piece of me? And that again goes for animals too. Staring is a sign of confrontation and conflict. Okay. Now with touch, research shows that casual touch in a in a casual sort of interaction, you've probably all met people who are touchy. You just met them, and in the span of that just meeting someone, maybe they touch your arm or your shoulder, or they're laughing and they touch you, in your hand or your arm or whatever. They're just sort of touchy people. That kind of touch seems to be initiated primarily by men, older people, and people who are higher in socioeconomic status or power. They're in a power position, right? So what touch seems to communicate in that kind of context is intimacy and dominance. Intimacy and dominance. Now here's the third theory that I was talking about that I wanted to mention. This is the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory. It's a very cognitive approach. And essentially what it says is when you feel your body, the physiological changes, so you got some kind of event that causes a physiological change in your body, right? Your heart's racing, maybe your palms are sweaty, so on. That change causes you to maybe not literally look around, but causes your brain to kind of find what's the most logical or immediate reason why I'm feeling this physiological change. What is it? What's happening right around me now? And that thing, whatever your brain centers on or focuses on, will tell you how to cognitively label the emotion, the physiological arousal. So let's say you're feeling nervous and you're getting all sweaty and your heart's racing, and your brain is saying, "Why am I feeling this way?" And then there's a very attractive person standing right by you. Then that will tell your brain to say, "Let's label this nervousness as attraction or love or lust or whatever you want to call it." Okay, so it's like I said, it's starting out with this premise that something happens in your environment and you have a physiological change. The change is the thing that triggers this process, the physiological arousal. And it's also saying that the physiological arousal is it's the same building block as for all emotions. The only thing that differs in all these emotions is your brain deciding to, give it that arousal a particular label, like fear, love, anger, right, anxiety. Okay. This one really isn't. I'm gonna skip this. This isn't really the best of a thing. Let me see if I have it. Okay, let's go back to this. Now, this particular slide is a slide for the Schachter and Singer experiment that I want to talk about a little bit. And it nicely supports their Schachter-Singer theory, the two-factor theory of emotion. Okay, so let's start with the very top. And by the way, this is definitely something that probably will show up on a future reinforcement opportunity, let's say. I think the simplest way to write, rather than writing this out as a narrative, is just to write out this, maybe copy this down, this little graph, and it'll help you when you're studying. So let's start with at the very top, going from the top. You got two groups, control and experimental. They're told that they're going to be testing out a new vitamin. It's administered through a shot. So the experimental group gets an epinephrine shot, which is a hormone that causes you to become physiologically aroused. Heart goes faster, palms get sweatier, blood pressure increases, and so on. Now, the people in the control group, they got a shot, but it was just sort of a saline kind of solution that has no effect on them at all. It's a placebo, right? No effect on them. Now, the control group further is given no more information about this shot. They're just told this vitamin is new and we're testing it out. And that's about it. On the experimental side, it's broken up into two groups, uninformed and informed. The uninformed group is just like the placebo group, the control group. They're given no more information about this shot. They're just that it's a vitamin and we're testing it out. Now, the informed group is given more information. They're told this is a vitamin that's been tested in the past. It's been shown in the past to have some side effects, like you may feel yourself feeling maybe a little bit more nervous or agitated. Heart might be racing faster, blood pressure increasing, maybe sweaty hands, and so on. So they're told it might have that kind of effect on them. Now, as you can see, though the control group, I'm going to hold off on that one for a second. We'll start with the experimental. Broken up, right, as I said, into the uninformed and informed, and those groups are each broken up into two groups, happy and angry. Okay, so what does that mean? They're told that after they get the shot, we'd like you to wait in a waiting room with someone who just had the same shot that you did earlier, about maybe 20 minutes ago. Takes about 15 to 20 minutes for this thing to kick in and having effect on you. And so they're told to wait in a waiting room with someone else. And what on the far left here, it says happy conf, C-O-N-F. That refers to happy confederate. Confederate is someone who's working with the experimenter, pretending to be a subject, but they're not really a subject. So the confederate is in there, and they're told, they were told by an experimenter, I want you to act really happy. And so they're saying things like, oh, this great study. I love studies like this, and this is awesome. I'm having a good time. What's your name? Blah, blah, blah. Really in a great mood. People who are assigned to a different condition, right? They're getting an angry confederate. So that's what the angry, C-O-N-F, in the uninformed. So those people were in a waiting room with someone who's, they're told they just had the same shot earlier that you had, and they're acting really angry. Oh, this is stupid. This is the most stupid experiment. I'm really angry. This is just, maybe they kick the trash can in the waiting room. This is stupid. I'm ready to be done with this. I need to go, and whatever. And again, in the informed condition, that's further broken up into those two kind of confederate conditions, happy and angry. Now, I want to say the purpose of this is let's sort of overall first talk about all this. If you've got in the control group, right, you've got a situation where there's no arousal happening. So think about the theory. If you don't have any arousal happening, your brain isn't going to be searching for a reason why there's no arousal, right? It only searches for something to label if there's, if you've got this nervous arousal. So the being exposed to someone who's happy or angry is not going to affect your mood at all, because this whole search process wasn't even initiated, right, according to the theory, because there's no arousal at the very beginning, right? So that's what I mean on the far right, control group, no effect of the confederate mood on the subject because the subject didn't even become aroused in the first place. Now, on the experimental condition, everybody in the experimental condition became aroused, right, because of the hormone, epinephrine. Now, the informed group knew why they were going to become nervous. It was because they were told, oh, this is an effect of the vitamin. It's going to make you feel this way. If you know why, right, you already know why you're feeling nervous, there's no need for you to your brain to cast about and look around for, how do I label this nervousness? You already know why. So there's no effect of the confederate mood, right, some external situation on your mood, because the arousal is attributed to the drug. You say, oh yeah, I'm feeling nervous now and I already know why, so I don't need to look about and try to label it fear or anger. I already know why. It's because of the drug. So there's no effect of the Confederate mood on the subject mood. Now let's move all the way to the left, uninformed. They're feeling nervous. They don't know why, right? Which is the perfect setup for the two-factor theory. When you're feeling nervous, you don't know why. Your brain is going to look around for what's the main reason. What is the most immediate explanation for why I'm feeling nervous? Now, when they're sitting with their Confederate, someone who just had the same shot that they did, they're saying to themselves, I'm feeling nervous. And so I need to figure out a way to label this nervousness. I mean, they're not consciously thinking that, but that's kind of what the brain's doing, right? And if you're seeing someone who has the same situation that you did, and they're feeling happy, then you're probably going to feel happy, right? Your brain is saying, same situation, they had the same shot, and they're feeling great, so you're going to feel great. Yeah, that's probably what you're feeling, is feeling happy. Or same situation, and the other person is feeling angry, right? So the nervousness you're feeling is probably anger. And that's exactly what happened, as you can see on that far left graph. So all these results nicely supported the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory of emotion, this idea that when you're feeling this nervousness, your brain looks around for the most immediate reason for why you're nervous, and then it gives that a cognitive label. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about the influence of the way that you feel on the way that you think. And first thing is something called ambiguous stimuli. Now, let's say you have two job candidates. On paper, they look the same. And one comes for an interview at 11 and one comes for an interview at 2. And the employer, meets with them, and then takes an hour lunch or something, and they get a couple martinis. And so at 2 o'clock, they're feeling pretty good, from the drinks that they had at lunch. And then when it comes time for deciding who do they like, let's further state that both of the candidates gave great answers, right? So the interview went great for both. But then so it's ambiguous. Who should I hire? They both look the same in all respects. What may happen to tilt the scales for the employer is they're going to look back and say, well, what was I feeling when I was interviewing them? I was feeling pretty good about this second person. They said a lot of the good things. I really liked they resonated with a lot of the things that they said. So I'm going to hire the second person. And it likely was an issue of the person, right, the employer, using mood, in this case, maybe positive feelings from some drinks they had, putting them in a better mood. So using that mood as an indicator to break the tie, shall we say. And now they're not consciously doing that, but that's what may be happening. So like I said, we use our moods to sometimes inform us on decisions, and tell us what to think. Right, influence of affect on cognition. So if you have to decide, what should I do? Which, whatever school should I go to, or you're making big life decisions, or person should I date? Some people might say, well, go with your gut. What does your gut tell you, right? What they're saying is, use your moods to decide how to think. Mood congruent recall is interesting. The idea here is that when you're in a certain mood, essentially, we tend to link certain memories and information with certain feeling states. And so when you're in a particular mood, you will be, it'll affect the way you think and remember information, in that we tend to remember information. For example, when you're in a good mood, you remember the good stuff. Like, let's say, thinking back on past relationships. When you're in a good mood, You think of those past relationships, and you tend to remember them through sort of rose-colored glasses. You think of mostly the good times. You may say, well, yeah, we had some ups and downs, but mostly we probably had ups, and it was good, and I learned a lot, and whatever. But when you're in a bad mood and you do the same exercise, thinking about past relationships, what do? You think, oh, you think of all the negatives. Oh, wow, I really dodged a bullet with that person, and that person was crazy, and this blah, blah, blah. That was a terrible relationship. Sure, we had some good times, but mostly it was bad, right? So, mood congruent recall, our moods bias the information that is linked, comes to our mind. Now, interestingly, research shows that positive moods, contrary to the stereotype of, for example, a starving artist, a depressed, angst-ridden artist, that actually being in a positive mood makes you more creative. And the simple answer, for a reason why that is because we tend to want to remember being in a positive mood. There's more things that are linked to feeling good than are feeling bad. We don't try to, oh, I'm feeling terrible, I want to remember this. We don't do that. We say, I'm feeling good, I want to remember this. So you link more information to positive feelings than to negative. And therefore, why that results in more creativity is simply you have more information to work with, more things to work with, sort of in terms of not only artistic creation, but being scientifically creative, right? You have more information in your storehouse when you're feeling in a better mood. Now, let's talk a little bit about the reverse, how the way you think influences the way you feel. And we'll put this first one up here. Great example of that was the Schachter and Singer theory, right? The way that you think, right? The cognitive label that you give to your arousal will determine how you subjectively feel. If I label the arousal of fear, I'm going to feel the subjective experience of fear. Okay. Schemas are an organized hierarchical structure in our mind that contains basically everything that we know about something. Organized cognitive structure in our mind that contains everything we know about something. And in the schemas, and within that, there are stereotypes, rumors, facts, things about what to expect, things about motives, how you should feel, and so on. And so, if I meet someone and I find out that they're a firefighter, let's say, and I pull up my schema for firefighters, and again, this is not a conscious process, but just sort of naturally happens. Firefighters, what do I know about firefighters? And pulls up everything in your sort of database, everything in your schema for firefighters. How you should, what they, your knowledge about what they do, maybe the training that they have to go into, their place in society, how you should, their motives, how you should feel toward them, and so on. And the schema will tell you how to think and feel, how to feel about firefighters. And it'll probably tell you to feel respectful and maybe admiration and maybe gratitude, right, toward them, and express those things. Okay. Now, attribution is an interesting one as well. Basically, what attribution is trying to explain other people's behavior. Like, are they doing or saying something because of that's who they are? That would be an internal attribution. Or is it something outside of them that's causing them to behave that way? Like some external attributions, right? Something outside of them. Like, for example, the job tells them that they have to do this or say this. Because that's what their job requires them to do. Let's say, I think a really clear one is example of this is driving. Let's say you're merging onto the highway, and you don't see another car on the highway. It's already there as you're merging in from onto the on-ramp. So essentially, you kind of cut them off. And Now, I'm the person. Let's say I'm the person who was cut off, right? And so you cut me off. Now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to attribute the reason for what you did. Right? I'm driving, and you cut me off. Now, if I make the attribution that the reason you cut me off was something outside of you that caused you to behave that way. For example, you were distracted. You just clearly didn't see me. It was an accident. Then I'll probably say to myself, oh, they didn't see me. It was an accident. It happens to everybody. No big deal. And not even give it another thought. So it won't affect me at all. It won't affect my emotions. But what if I said to myself, they saw me as they're merging on, and this person saw me, and they said to themselves, I'm gonna totally cut them off and disrespect them, and teach them, that I'm gonna be the alpha male. I'm gonna cut them off. I'm gonna teach them that they're a loser and they're a loser car or whatever. Whatever attribute. So what you're doing is you're saying they purposely cut me off because that's the kind of jerk that they are, right? And they're trying to, whatever it is, disrespect me. This is, sounds really silly, but this is the essence of road rage. And so it has this particular attribution that you make, if you're making a personal attribution, it has a tremendous influence on some people's, no, thankfully not most, but some people's feelings. I mean, in terms of in an extreme way, right? Most people, even if you did come to an attribution that they did it on purpose and that they're just kind of jerks, most people even then they'll feel irritated. Maybe they'll feel even very irritated, but they're probably not going to take it to the level of, violence or even, trying to kill someone. But some people do. A minority of incidents where people just take it way too far, and you can see how there can sometimes be deadly consequences. Okay. So another example of how the way you think about something influences how you feel. Now, the way that you expect things to go will often determine your feelings. And this is you may have heard of this before, but there's a lot of evidence, tons of evidence actually out there on this issue, on expectancies. So, for example, a thing I like to always talk about in lecture is, say you're going to a party and someone, your friends are taking you to the party and they say, oh, this is going to be a great party. You're going to have a lot of fun people there. What happens is we tend to sort of unconsciously do things to elicit fun behavior in other people, right? To confirm our expectations. We go in there with high expectations. It's going to be great. And what will happen is we'll do things to try to elicit fun behavior in other people. We'll try to also keep the fun going, right? By in any efforts that we can do, because we have that expectation. And then what happens is you walk away from the party saying, "Yep, that was right. It was a fun party, right? My expectations are fulfilled." And the reverse also can be true as well. If you go in thinking this party is going to be just a turkey, it's going to be just boring as heck, and you walk in there, what happens is you'll tend to do things that elicit kind of boring behavior in others, right? You're not gonna try. You're kind of sit back, folding your arms, saying, "Entertain me." Right? Well, nobody likes someone like that, right? That's going to be... And then you walk away from that party thinking, you know what? I was right. I expected it to be dumb, and it was dumb. Last, we've got counterfactual thinking. Counterfactual thinking is thinking about what might have been. A lot of research on this, and it's very fascinating. But again, thinking about what might have been, the if-onlys. And you can do this after positive events. Like, let's say you get an A, and then what you do is you mentally undo the event or go back and think about it and say, it's a good thing I did X, Y, and Z because that resulted in me in getting an A. But much more often, maybe 99% of the time, we engage in counterfactual thinking after a negative event has happened. Something bad happens, and what do we tend to do? We think, like say, car accident. You get in a car accident. You think, if only I had left 5 minutes earlier or later, then that truck wouldn't have hit me, right? Or if only this, if I had only done that, if only I had, taking a different route to work instead of this other weird route that I'm not familiar with, I wouldn't have gotten in a car accident, and so on and so on. We try to mentally undo the event. Now, there's a couple things about counterfactual thinking. The first thing is the more ways that we can mentally undo an event, something bad that's happened, the stronger our negative reaction is to the event. So let's say that I'll give you an example. When I was, how old was I? 17, I would say, maybe. I worked at a department store in the stock room, and I was going to. It was around 9 o'clock. Going to see a friend who also worked there at the mall. After and pick him up after work, and we're going to go. I don't know what we're going to go do. And so I'm driving there, and it's residential street, pretty dark though, and going 30 miles an hour, and boom, I hit something. It was a medium-sized dog, black dog, came out of nowhere, no tags, no collar, nothing, and people came out. And of course, I stopped, and I was shaking and freaked out, and bunch of people came out of their houses, and they were, were saying basically the dog is, only got probably minutes to live. It wasn't doing very well. And they said though, but they were putting their arms around me saying, "Are you okay?" And they said there was nothing you could have done, right? That was bound to happen. They said that this dog was a stray, had been walking around, been seen around the neighborhood for several days. Nobody knows whose dog it is, and it's dark. It's at night. It wasn't very well lit. Bound to get hit. But that didn't really make me feel any better, at the time. But what they were doing is something that people tend to do when bad things happen, like accidents and so on. And they say that there was nothing you could have done to avoid the situation. What that means is they're trying to stop you from engaging in counterfactual thinking. They're trying to get you to say that it was unavoidable. Because if you start saying to yourself, if I had only done this, if only this, if only this, if only this, you try to say there was lots of ways you could have avoided it, then you feel terrible, right? There's so many things you could have done to avoid it. But if they say there's nothing you could have done to avoid it, then maybe your negative feelings will be reduced a little bit. That's kind of what they were trying to do. Now, the extreme example, the other direction, is the Titanic. I don't know if I have this on here or not. Yeah, I don't have that. But I have it in a different lecture. The Titanic, great example of many ways that that sinking could have been avoided. There were so many things that if only they had done one of those things, 1,500 people wouldn't have lost their lives. I'll give you just a few examples, like when they saw the iceberg, instead of slowing, and actually throwing the engines into reverse, which is what they did, and that was actually the worst thing they could have done, because what happens is it takes a long time for the engines to stop and then slowly start going into reverse. And in the meantime, the thing is still drifting. But the fact is, it's drifting, and you have no control over the steering. You can't really steer it very well when the engines are kind of going, blah, 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 trying to restart in a reverse fashion. What they should have done is something that counterintuitively, actually, they should have sped up and slammed it hard to the port, and they probably, so it's speculation, but they probably could have avoided hitting the iceberg. Another thing is, and this is a really simple one, this is the first one that most people cite, have enough lifeboats for the amount of people on your boat. The guy who owned the company that owned, that built the Titanic said, he just said, I don't, this ship is unsinkable, so we really don't need, I mean, these lifeboats are kind of like decoration, really. We don't need all these lifeboats. And he wanted to clear up the deck space to have enough room to play games and have more deck chairs. And so they had about half of as many boats as the amount of people. So there's another reason. And I'll throw out one more. They have watertight compartments on the bottom of the boat throughout the bottom. And what that means is if you put a gash in the side of the boat right under the water line, and water starts filling up into that little section, that the water would only stay in that one little section. It wouldn't go throughout the whole boat. The whole boat wouldn't sink because it would be watertight, right? That's the whole idea. It's just contained in that one little section. Well, that would be great if they actually made it watertight, but they did not make it watertight. The walls of these sections only went up so high, they did not go all the way to the ceiling of that section. So essentially what you've got is like a regular ice tray, right? Have you ever filled an ice tray, regular old school ice tray? Put it under the faucet, and it fills with the first one, and then it spills over into the next one, and then the next one. And that's exactly what happened. That the first, forward part of there was this 300-foot long gash in the side of the boat. The first section that started filled up, and then it spilled over the wall because it didn't go all the way to the ceiling. And so therefore was not watertight. I don't know why they call them watertight compartments. And then spilled into the next section, filled that one up, spilled over the third section, and so on, and just then doomed the ship right there. No way to recover. It just kept filling up and filling up. So anyway, there are probably a dozen at least other examples. There's so many examples like that if just one of those hadn't happened, the ship wouldn't have sunk and all those lives wouldn't have been lost. So that's why people are so fascinated, I think, with the Titanic, and why it's still sort of haunting to look at as a historical event. Now, another thing that's interesting about counterfactual thinking, so that was the first issue, is the more ways you can undo it, the stronger the affect reaction. The other thing is, when something bad happens, what we tend to do is we look at what is the most salient thing that almost happened but didn't, and that'll also affect how we feel. So in counterfactual thinking, so let's say something bad. Let's talk about grades. This is an easy one. Let's say that you get a score on your exam, and it is, let's say it's you got a B minus, okay, B minus on the exam. Okay, so you're saying to yourself, I feel pretty good, and the reason why you probably feel pretty good is, what is the thing that almost happened but didn't? Well, you almost got a C. You could have gotten a C, right? You're right on the border of a C and a B, but you got the B, so you're feeling pretty good, right? But if, let's say, you got a C plus, right, and you were maybe like 1 or 2 points away from a B. So the thing that almost happened but didn't is getting a B, but you didn't get that. You got a C, so you're feeling kind of crummy. And a great example of this in real life was a study done with Olympic athletes in I want to say the 1992 Olympics. And what these researchers did was they looked at film and interviews of people who had just finished their event and how they were talking about their performance. and also how the top three winners were on the podium, like their emotional expression and so on. And they're looking for evidence of counterfactual thinking and so on. But let's keep it simple and look at the top three winners. So you'd say, if I ask you just now, right, point blank, what mood, who's feeling the happiest, second happiest, third happiest on the Olympic, winners podium? Most people would say, well, the happiest is going to be the gold medal winner, obviously. Second happiest is the silver. Third is the bronze. Turns out that's not true. So let's break it down in terms of looking at it through counterfactual thinking. For a gold medal, what did they almost do but didn't? Come in second, but they didn't. They came in first. So they're feeling great. Now let's go to the second place winner. What's the thing that almost happened but didn't? Coming in first. But what happened? They came in second. So they're feeling like, they're feeling really bummed out. And then third, you've got the bronze medal winner. Now, what's the thing that almost happened for them but didn't? Not getting on the winner's podium, right? Coming in fourth, but that didn't happen, right? They came in third, and they're on the winner's podium. They feel great to be there. They feel super happy. And this research found, and you can check this out too. You can Google these images, Olympic podium, and Olympic medal winners podium, and happiness or moods or facial expressions. And what you'll find over and over again is the two out of the three people who are the big huge grins are the first place winner and the third place winner, and the people who are not smiling is the second place winner. I'm not going to need you to know any of these things. This is kind of interesting about happy people. But research finds that when they're happy and they know it, they tend to clap their hands. That's my own little joke for you. I hope you enjoyed that. Happy people are high self-esteem, outgoing, good friendships, meaningful, religious faith, sleep well, exercise, all this stuff. But interestingly, it's only minimally related to things like age or race or gender or education, parenthood. It doesn't seem to contribute necessarily to being more or less happy. And we got another 5-star to end out our discussion on emotion. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next for the next lecture on motivation.